Good evening, everyone. We're waiting for folks to join. We'll be starting the program in just a moment. Good evening, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this very special webinar. You are tuning in to the Michigan LCV People, Planet, Public Health webinar series. We've started holding these monthly webinar series when the pandemic started about a year and a half ago to keep our members engaged and to bring all of you information and dynamic discussions covering a really wide range of topics, from climate change, clean water, clean energy, and voter protection. Over the last year, we've held dozens of these webinars with leaders at the local, state, and federal levels, with frontline activists, experts, doctors, nurses, authors, and many, many others. All recordings from our past webinars, should you be interested, can be found on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/MichiganLCV. For today's event, we're very excited to have another amazing lineup of speakers who will talk about the transformative opportunities that we have to create jobs, clean up our water, take action on climate, all with President Biden's American Jobs Plan. The president unveiled the plan in March, and it's a plan that's about supporting each other and our communities through large-scale investments in big, bold public improvement projects. All across our country and in Michigan, we have the opportunity to create good-paying, family-raising, union jobs for electricians, pipe fitters, plumbers, roofers, engineers, welders, cement layers, and many, many others. The $2 trillion investment in our infrastructure will put Michiganders to work replacing things like old roads and bridges, which we certainly know about in Michigan, lead pipes and aging sewers, which again, we certainly know about in Michigan, weatherizing homes and buildings and investing in clean energy. There has never been a better or more important moment to invest in our future. And let me be clear, this plan has enormous implications in very tangible ways for all levels of government and will have real impacts on communities all across our country. Upgrading our water infrastructure, creating job training programs to fuel the work, and expanding public services as people get back on their feet as we emerge from COVID-19. This is the work of cities, of states, and of the federal government. What's not spoken about enough is that there are tremendous implications for public health and the environment. As we replace aging, dangerous water pipes and upgrade our electric grid, there is an opportunity to ensure that the air that we all breathe and the water that we drink is safe and free of toxic contaminants. Before I introduce our amazing speakers tonight and we dive into the program, I'd like to play a video our communications team put together that helps tell the story of the moment.
The United States isn't waiting. We are resolving to take action. Not only our federal government, but our cities and our states all across our country. Small businesses, large corporations, American workers in every field. I see an opportunity to create millions of good-paying, middle-class union jobs. I see line workers laying thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, resilient grid. I see auto workers building the next generation of electric vehicles and electricians installing nationwide for 500,000 charging stations along our highways.
The future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back.
By maintaining those investments and putting these people to work, the United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation. And that's what we can do if we take action to build an economy that's not only more prosperous, but healthier, fair, and cleaner for the entire planet.
Last year, I announced the Michigan Clean Water Plan, a $500 million investment in Michigan's water infrastructure. Direct dollars to communities for safe, clean water to residents. And it supports over 7,500 Michigan jobs. It's time for the legislature to pass these bills so we can start rebuilding Michigan's water infrastructure.
You know, those that do take action and make bold investments in their people and clean energy future will win the good jobs of tomorrow and make their economies more resilient and more competitive.
Workers power our economy. Labor will lift them up. It's on us in Congress to put those priorities in place. And that's exactly what the Thrive Agenda will do.
The countries that take decisive action now to create the industries of the future will be the ones that reap the economic benefits of the clean energy boom that's coming. We have to take action, all of us.
Parents and children should not have to worry about air quality, taking our kids to the park around the corner, or when we fill up water from the tap. So because of that, the governor and I want to make sure that people who are impacted most directly and most deeply by the challenges that we face, that you are at the table when it comes to addressing environmental justice.
If we do, we'll breathe easier, literally and figuratively. We'll create good jobs here at home for millions of Americans and lay a strong foundation for growth for the future. And that can be your goal as well. This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities.
I hope that video sets the tone for our discussion this evening. Tonight, you'll hear from three amazing guests. You'll hear from David Kieve, Director of Public Engagement for the White House Council on Environmental Quality, Congresswoman Debbie Dingle, who represents Michigan's 12th Congressional District, and Rei Fielder, Manager of Michigan Alliance for Justice in Climate. Each of them will offer their perspectives on the opportunities that lie ahead for our state and our country. Before I turn it over to David, our first speaker, I'd like to remind you that we will have a question and answer segment at the end of this program, where we'll take questions from the audience. So for those of you who are tuning in on Zoom, please click the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type in your question there. And for those of you joining us via Facebook Live, please submit your question in the comment section in the live stream. We'll also be launching a poll during the presentation with opportunities to get involved with Michigan LCV. I'd now like to introduce David Kieve. David is the Director, as I told you, of Public Engagement at the White House Council for Environmental Quality. He leads outreach for the Biden administration's work on climate and is playing a major role as the President seeks approval of the American Jobs Plan. Welcome, David. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to the members of Michigan League Conservation Voters. I'm thrilled and honored to be here. And I have to confess, I'm a little scared to have to speak before Congresswoman Debbie Dingle. I confided some of that fear in my good friend, Carrie Dugan, who I know is on your board and who's watching tonight. And she had some friendly advice for me that was, as always, straight to the point. She said, say pop instead of soda, talk about the Great Lakes a lot, and it wouldn't hurt if you made fun of Ohio. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, hopefully I can get into the substance of my remarks and then get out of the way so that you all can hear from your wonderful Congresswoman Dingle. To me, the story of the first several months of the Biden administration is all of us who have the privilege of working for him, rolling up our sleeves and working as hard as we possibly can at his direction to do all that we can to implement the bold commitments that he made over the course of the campaign and the promises that he made to the American people. We're following his lead on this. It started on his very first day in office, where he took bold, sweeping executive action on climate change. It continued a week later when he had an even bigger, more ambitious executive order on climate change that had at its heart a real commitment and setting up a structure and pathway to move forward to honor our commitment to correct historic environmental injustices. And it's continued every single day since then. It's perhaps not as the biggest deal on earth to some, but we were really proud yesterday that our colleagues, led by Secretary Buttigieg at the Department of Transportation, rolled out an ambitious rule on methane, telling pipeline operators exactly what they need to do to come into compliance with the Pipes Act, which passed into law last year. This could conceivably reduce methane emissions by as much as 30%. We're proud of that action. We're proud of the fact that last week we announced a historic agreement on offshore wind between the Department of the Interior and the Department of Defense that'll allow for the first time ever offshore wind development off the coast of California, which is a really big deal. We're proud of historic project labor agreements to expand offshore wind capacity and develop offshore wind capacity in the Atlantic. And we're also proud of the fact that through our America the Beautiful plan, President Biden has laid out the first ever national conservation goal to set into conservation 30% of our land and water, including presumably quite a bit of the Great Lakes by the year 2030. So all of this are things that we are doing at the staff level, at the president's direction and vice president's direction every single day in order to advance his priorities. But as Lisa mentioned at the top, and as I'd be remiss to not say, the biggest deal of all is passing the American Jobs Plan. President Biden's awfully proud of his role in passing the Recovery Act in 2009. He's proud of the fact that it remains the largest investment in clean energy in our nation's history. But it won't be for long, because when we pass the American Jobs Plan, that will become the largest investment in clean energy in our nation's history, probably by a factor of 20 or 30 times. I'm old enough to remember. I wouldn't have to be very old to remember. There was a time not too long ago when you wouldn't go to Michigan and talk about electric vehicles. It was thought to be something that you didn't do because you might upset the United Auto Workers. We've blown through that, thanks in large part to the leadership of Congresswoman Dingle and to the Michigan League of Conservation Voters and everyone else who's involved in this. I think we've sensed that there is an enormous opportunity before us today, because the American people no longer buy into this false construct that you can either choose to do what's right for the planet or what's right for the economy. The American people understand, and Michiganders understand, that the jobs of the future are in clean energy. And I'm as happy to be here as almost as happy to be here as the president was when he got up behind the wheel of that Ford F-150 Lightning a few weeks ago. I don't think you could fake his level of enthusiasm or excitement for being where he was. As he said, he's always referred to himself as a car guy. Maybe he's got to start calling himself a truck guy now. But this nexus of bringing together union workers, organized labor, and the unions that represent working men and women, and environmentalists together around shared goal of driving our country forward, restoring American leadership around clean energy, and making our country the global leader in clean energy is fundamental and central to what we're trying to do every single day. So thank you to all that I know that each of you are already doing to help us work to try to pass the American Jobs Plan. I'll stick around for questions, but that's about what I've got for this evening. But thank you for having me. And thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And I have to be honest, when the announcement was made about the F-150, I went online and reserved one. You know, I want to be on the front edge of this amazing wave. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to introduce my amazing Congresswoman, Congresswoman Debbie Dingle, who represents the 12th Congressional District, where I'm standing in the Congressional District right now. Congresswoman Dingle has been on the front lines of battling just about everything the Trump administration put forward as it worked to roll back environmental safeguards that protect our air, land, and water. Since her first day in office, she's been fighting like crazy for our air, our land, and our water. Throughout the pandemic, Congresswoman Dingle has been working to make sure that people have access to clean water for drinking, cooking, and hygiene, and is still fighting to pass bills like her Emergency Water is a Human Right Act to put a nationwide moratorium in place on shutting off people's tap water and providing direct water bill assistance to households in need. She has led the efforts to boost clean energy deployment across our country, including being a key sponsor of what we have already heard about, the Thrive Act, which is a comprehensive plan to transition our country to clean, renewable sources of energy and create a just, healthy, and equitable society. Congresswoman Dingle has been a fighter from day one in her tenure for the people of Michigan and for the people of this country. I'm very proud to introduce Congresswoman Dingle. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa, for that very kind introduction. And it's wonderful to be with you. And I want to say to everybody here from the Michigan LCV team and the leadership that you show for everybody to advance the important environmental priorities across the state on a very nonpartisan basis. And you're protecting the environment for future generations. And as you, first of all, it's also Great Lakes Week. So happy Great Lakes Week to everybody. But the work that you've done to advocate and fight for the health of the Great Lakes, solutions to the climate crisis, the safe drinking water, clean air, good government, supporting parks and public lands, LCV, just, you're there and you're fighting every day. So I want to say thank you to that. And it is quite an honor to be here with David. He's doing a great job at the White House. And I have to say to all of you that I was the person that suggested to the president that maybe he come out for the F-150, because I think some people don't think that the electric vehicle is real. But when you get in that F-150, you know it's real. It has the same performance. And the glint in his eye that day, I haven't seen President Biden that happy in a long time. So it was great to have him here and to be with the UAW and him in Michigan, doing what we all are fighting for, cleaning up the environment and protecting jobs. So that was a really important day. And I want to thank you. And maybe that's a good way to begin to talk about some of the things that Lisa talked about, David talked about how we need to stop making false choices. There are too many, I'm learning in public office, too many people make you make false choices. And it's not between the environment and jobs. We can do both. And that's what I'm fighting for right now, very intentionally and very intersectionally. And I'm going to talk about that a little more, but we do need to worry about the environment, but we can protect jobs here and make sure that we keep jobs here. And that's what I have been focusing on every single day. Many of you know I had perforated ulcer 2 weeks ago, surprise surgery I wasn't expecting, but I've not worked the phones every day of getting better, because this is so critical to the future of America, to the future of this country, and keeping us at the forefront of innovation and technology, which I am totally committed to doing. And quite frankly, I'm totally committed to keeping Michigan there. So let me give you a quick overview of where we are, or where things are in the Congress today. You've gotten a bit of flavor from both Lisa and David, but at the federal level, we're trying to combat climate change and boost the economy at the same time. And it's really now is where the rubber hits the road. And we're really having a lot of intense conversations. We're moving towards the long-term recovery. We've come out of the American Rescue Plan, and that's what the America Jobs Bill, the infrastructure package, is going to do. And the president's going to get it done. And I'm going to be right there having his back and helping make sure that this does happen. Conversations have continued with President Republicans. Today, he took another major step saying, we're not going to delay, we're going to move forward. And I'm really happy about that. So combating climate change and reviving our economy go hand in hand. This comes in many forms, including investing in clean energy, maintaining our manufacturing leadership in the auto industry by going electric, and I'm going to talk about what that means in a minute, and ensuring that everyone does have access to safe and clean. We invest in more clean energy technologies and infrastructure, is that we need to be able to help people invest in it. So we have, and I'm proud that the White House is supporting it, a clean energy and sustainability accelerator that's based and is bipartisan. Don Young, not normally the Republican, you think of being on things like this, as well as John Cacco and a number of other Republicans, have joined me on this bill that I've authored in the President's American Jobs Plan so that we can build on one of the states where it's worked and spur investments in clean, renewable energy, millions of jobs for Americans, and combat the climate crisis at the same time. Jobs and cleaning up the environment. One of the most important things that I'm doing right now, and David referred to it a little, is working to make sure that we do stay at the forefront of innovation and technology. Michigan's the home of the global that way. Now, some days you need to, and I've been in the middle of it. I've had people scream at me every way to Sunday the last few years. I want to be honest here as we're having this conversation. Remember, I am the person that warned you 4 years ago. We needed to be listening to some of the workers. Donald Trump could win because people didn't think that we cared about their jobs. Well, we do care about their jobs. And we have been in very focused and intentional conversations with the unions, UAW, IBEW, and others, and the national environmentalists, and it is not at a low level. The president of every major environmental group has been at the table while we're having these discussions. Gene Karpewski, who's president of LCB, has been there and participates in the meetings, as well as NRDC, the EDF, the Sierra Club, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and a number of other groups. John Podesta from CAP has agreed to lead the work group, and we're making sure that and I want to say this to everybody, this is real. If you are, pandemics kept us from being with each other as much, but some of the workers are really worried that they're going to lose their jobs. Well, the environmentalist community is hearing that. So we're making sure that as we set these goals, we're also protecting jobs and ensuring. So the internal combustion engine has jobs with it. That's going to go away, but we need to bring batteries here. We need to build them here. We need to create good paying jobs, and we need to pay a decent and real wage to the worker. I think we were all stunned that the day after President Biden gave his state of the, I forget what we called it. It wasn't the State of the Union because it was his first year, that General Motors announced they were investing $1 billion in Mexico. That's not okay. And we're all going to work to make sure that that's not the case. So we hear workers. They're at the table though. And we're working to make sure we're going to build EVs here. We're going to build the best. You all, if you could see that F-150 truck, it can do so many things. It's got performance, but if we've got a energy disruption like you saw in Texas, that F-150 truck's going to be able to keep your refrigerator going too. So that's really important. And that's why I've introduced the USA Electrify Forward Act and the ATVM Futures Act to modernize and expand programs that we use to build and retool factories in the United States, so that future generations of American workers will benefit long-term. And at the same time, we're going to decarbonize the economy. Electric vehicles are here. Other countries are going to build them. Well, we can't afford to not be in that competition. We're going to lead it. We're going to be at the forefront of it. And we're going to lead China and any other country that tries to compete with us. And that's why we have to be so intentional. And I could go on electric vehicles forever. So I'll talk about that more, but I will tell you three more things. That as we do them, they've got to be affordable. We got to build a battery that people have confidence in. So we got to invest in the R&D so they know what's going to have the range, build it here. And 3, we do have to upgrade. We have to build out the electric vehicle infrastructure. And, it's easy to say up here, we're working on how we really do that. And we have to upgrade the power grid to do that. So that's kind of where just in case you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about it. And then we've got other public health and environmental challenges. So one of my top priorities that Lisa mentioned briefly, and is also included in President Biden's plan, is ensuring that every American's got access to safe drinking water. Let's be very clear. We need to eliminate lead service lines from everywhere. And we also have to eliminate the forever chemicals, PFAS. In Michigan, we know what that is. And more than many other states do. We've been at the forefront of trying to test for it, so we know how present it is. And again, I'm very proud of the fact that bipartisan, Fred Upton and I have reintroduced the PFAS Action Act, which passed the House last year. You can never trust the Senate to move anything, but I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken that shot. But we're going to get it done this year. We're going to be doing some other things too, like getting PFAS out of food containers, getting it out of makeup. We're working on all of that. And the other thing I'm working on is that water's a human right. You know, when this pandemic started, I said to Nancy, the doctors, the one thing everybody agreed on at the very beginning is people needed to wash their hands. And yet we're right across the country. And we need to guarantee that water is a human right. So Rashida and I have reintroduced legislation to address the water debt crisis. We were on with OMB and HHS this week on it again, establishing a permanent residential emergency relief program for public water systems. And David, I could just nudge again that I do wish we could get a moratorium for the moment on drinking water shutoffs, because I think it's really important. So I guess my important message here is we got to be really intentional. It isn't either or, it's both. But let's make sure we're not blowing off the worker. Let's let them know we hear them. And as all of the national organizations are doing, sitting at the table and working towards that. We're going to do both. We're going to get it done, and we're going to stay.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So many important points. Really appreciate all that you're doing and all that you're leading on. I know we're going to have a lot of questions that come to you at the end of this program. I'd now like to introduce our final speaker, Rei Fielder. Rei is a radical Black queer organizer, facilitator, healer, and artist who hails from the Motor City. Rei has been organizing around issues that impact Black Detroiters since they were 15 years old. Their dedication to movement work is fueled by their desire to see Black liberation come to fruition. Currently, Rei serves as the Climate Justice Campaign Manager for Michigan Alliance for Justice in Climate, a new alliance of over 50 groups that center people of color in leading the climate justice movement in Michigan and working for just and equitable solutions to racial injustice, climate disasters, and environmental degradation. The Michigan Alliance for Justice and Climate Coalition is rallying people around the Thrive Act, which we've heard about this evening, which presents a bold vision to revive our economy while addressing the related crises of climate change, racial injustice, public health, and economic inequity, with a plan to put millions of people back to work in a sustainable way and support a better life for the most vulnerable among us. We are so very grateful to have you with us this evening, Rei. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Rei Fielder, but I'm affectionately known by my colleagues and comrades as Rei. And so today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Michigan Alliance for Justice and Climate is, and talk about some of our work and what we're doing to move people forward, to have people take action and, you know, take hold of our climate, our just climate future. So MAGIC is what we call our coalition for short, is a statewide coalition of organizations, individuals, environmentalists, people who care about climate justice. And we are a statewide table that really is more of a justice table than it is specifically a climate table. We are a justice table that has a climate lens. And I say that because as the Congresswoman spoke today, and even as David spoke today, that the climate crisis that we face in the United States and really globally is not one that is about, you know, the economy or clean energy. It is one that is really an intersecting issue of climate and economy and racial justice and, frontline workers and all of these things truly do impact the climate crisis that we are facing. And so Magic, as that statewide table, really wanted to focus on that, really wanted to bring the voices who are typically not at the environmental justice and climate justice table to to that space, to hear from a directly impacted perspective and to potentially get legislation moved from that perspective. And so we do this in three ways. One, we focus on statewide narrative. So changing the narrative around climate justice from the pollution bad, planting trees and recycling good narrative to something that is way more deep, something that is intrinsic within us, something that speaks to our souls, and that is jobs. That is the asthma rates in the most polluted zip code in the country, which is in Detroit. That is addressing all of these things as a part of the climate issue. And the second piece is we have a we have a city and elections working group, which really focuses on getting folks at the local level who support environmental justice, to support climate justice legislation in those seats that we have at the statewide level. And so there are several municipalities and cities across the state of Michigan that are having local elections this year. And we believe that that is a main place for us to do our organizing, because we understand that power does not come from the top down, that we are the people and we have the power. And so, really focusing on a localized approach is something that is very important to us. And of course, our federal action working group, which has been focusing primarily on the Thrive Act. And so we've been talking a little bit about Thrive, and I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth about what Thrive is. And so, like right now, we have a once in a generation chance for Congress to pass a transformational economic recovery package that puts over 15 million people to work in family sustaining union jobs across the country. Okay. And so what this means is that we want to put people back to work. Just because we're saying we want clean energy does not mean we want folks to be out on the streets, to not be able to put food on the table. As a person who grew up, my father worked for Ford for 25 years and retired from there. My mother worked for the United States Postal Service as a letter carrier for 25 years. I saw firsthand how those jobs can really support a family. I also saw firsthand how, especially with my father, how it impacted his health. Being in these spaces, being in a toxic like a climate toxic environment, and what that has done for his health current day as a retired man. And so we don't want to take jobs away from people. Actually, we want more jobs, and we want them to be better jobs. We want them to be clean jobs. We want them to be unionized jobs, because the power is within the people. And so we truly support the Thrive Act, which is a Green New Deal sponsored agenda that was really informed by organizers on the ground, by environmentalists, and by people who are everyday workers just like me and you. And I truly appreciate being in this space as I get to share this stage with the Congresswoman who is one of the original sponsors of the Thrive Act and is also a champion for Thrive. So just to get a little bit deeper into that, Thrive stands for Transform, Heal, and Renew by investing in a vibrant economy. And that's exactly what we're going to need. It is a huge, huge, huge package with tons of standards that really focuses on infrastructure, that really focuses on clean energy, and also focuses on the things that we think about every day, like agriculture, public transportation. And so what that would mean for Michigan in its first year, if the Thrive agenda was passed in its entirety, is 250,000 new jobs in its first year. Tons of money to our public transportation infrastructure, which as the Motor City, you might think like maybe, we have good public transportation, but no, not really. And so this is why, focusing on trying to get elements of the Thrive Act to be a part of this next recovery package is so essential to us. State orgs are supporting this plan by meeting regularly, by having people on the ground, by having people meeting with our local elected folks. And so there are plenty of ways that, anyone on this call, anyone listening to me today can plug into helping us move to a clean economy, helping us move to a more just economy, and helping us think a little bit deeper about what climate justice is, what environmental justice is, and really incorporating all of the other intersecting elements as a part of that conversation. One of those ways is to join Magic. There are plenty of people on this call. There are plenty of people who are even on this panel who are attached to Magic in some way. And so please join Magic. You can reach out to me at my email address at myclimate, miclimate21@gmail.com. And so we really believe that this is what people need. We believe that people need to be the voice of the legislation that is passed. And this is why, talking to Congresswoman Dingle, talking to our other legislators is so important. And then doing the work on the community, at the community level on the ground is so important, so that folks know that everyday folks who are just working, making ends meet, have needs too, because we are the most directly impacted by this climate crisis. Thank you again so much for allowing me to have this space, and I look forward to the question and answer portion.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you for joining us. I know there are going to be a bunch of questions for all of our panelists this evening. I want to start taking some questions from the audience right now, and we'll also be launching a poll that asks several questions about getting involved with Michigan LCV. And as a reminder, to ask your question, you can put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen or comment in the Facebook live stream. So the first question that we are going to pose to, I think this should go to, well, I maybe start with Congresswoman Dingle. There's a concern that a deal will be struck on things like roads and bridges, but pieces like addressing climate change and environmental justice in a major way will be left out of the negotiations and the final bill. What can we do to make sure that these pieces stay together, stay in the final bill, so that we can transform our country and our planet for better?
Well, David probably can take that on too, but I'm going to say that the statement that was made by the White House late this afternoon, where he informed Senator Kieve that he didn't think the conversations were going what they needed to do and they weren't including what he thought needed to be included, are evidence that the president is very real and very serious about, we do need to rebuild our roads and our bridges, but we need to do them in an environmentally friendly way. And we have broken pipes across this country. We need to get rid of lead. That's core to what the president's going to do. So I've known him a very long time. I've had these discussions with him for a very long time. And I think he's trying to reassure people, which is one of the reasons he came to Michigan. He came to Ford to show people that he really understands all sides of it. But David, I'm going to turn this over to you. I know that President Biden is very focused on both pieces of this, jobs and the environment.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. One thing that I'm prohibited from doing that I'm very careful about, or try to be very careful about, is encouraging anyone to lobby their elected officials. So that's a bright line that I can't cross and won't cross. That having been said, I think the best thing that you guys can do, and I appreciate both the question and the spirit of the question, is to lift up all of the American Jobs Plan. We know that it's widely popular. We also know that, let's be honest, most of the American people don't know what the American Jobs Plan means. Those of us who are in Washington get very caught up in shorthand and get used to using acronyms, as my boss, the president, absolutely hates, and to talking in a shorthand way without actually explaining to folks what is within our bill. The elements of the jobs plan are enormously popular. Get out there and lift up the pieces of it that don't have anything to do with roads and bridges, and talk about why they're important and why they'll help restore American leadership to a clean energy transition.
And yet, Lisa, I was trying to figure out when to say this, and I'm going to say this right now. It's going to sound funny saying this on an LCB call, but we need to be very intentional about our language. So I want to say this to people. When you say green job to a lot of workers, they think that means their job's going away, it's not going to be replaced, or it's going to mean less money. That's not what it is. So I think we have to find another word for green job, quite frankly. Because I'm out there and I'm talking to people. What we're going to do is protect those jobs, create a new job. We're going to pay people a decent living, and we're going to clean up our environment at the same time. Michigan, more than any state in the country, understands, as we look at what happened in Flint, saw our children poisoned, the need to replace those water pipes, to do something about it. We're going to do that, creating jobs at the same time.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Congresswoman Dingle. I'm going to take a question from Claude, and this is for Ray. The question is, are there environmental justice lessons from Michigan that the Biden administration and Congress need to address so that we correct the mistakes or the wrongs of the past?
I think there are plenty of lessons that I could actually talk a lot about, but I think what I will focus on is number one, kind of like what Congresswoman Dingle just said, is really reassuring people that their jobs are protected and that we are transitioning from something that is harming the planet to something that will be renewable and sustainable for their children and their grandchildren, which is all what the kind of people are working for, is to create a life for themselves and their families. One of the other things that I think that we should be looking at is also false solutions. So false solutions to a clean energy or a clean environment. We don't necessarily think in Michigan that nuclear is the way to go. And just because we have these new electric vehicles, we really support that. But what does that mean to have an electric vehicle? What is the batteries? Is that good for the environment? We want to think fully and wholly about these things. And so the lesson to be learned here is that this is not a one-trick pony. This is not a flip of the switch. The lesson to be learned is that this is so deeply entrenched into our everyday lives that it is going to take tons and tons and tons of true and intentional thought on undoing the harm that has already been done, and repairing that and creating a space for a clean energy future. That is my answer to that question.
If I could just jump in quickly,
Yeah.
I very much appreciate that answer. I also think that we are doing our best to listen to and learn some of the lessons from Michigan. And the principal way in which we're committed to doing that is through the formation of the first ever White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. It sits at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, where I have the honor of working, and runs in tandem with an existing prior National EJ Council that sits at EPA. But the reason why it was formed and exists at CEQ is so it can be closer to the president, so it can advise the entirety of the administration. So we're proud to have a series of local environmental justice leaders from all across the country advising us so that we can better advise the president on how to get it right on environmental justice.
Appreciate both of your responses here. Maybe pivoting off of that, I mean, we've heard a lot about the Thrive Act this evening, and I'd like to know, and maybe I'll start with the Congresswoman again, but obviously this is for all three panelists. Do you see ways to include aspects of the Thrive agenda in the American Jobs Plan?
There, sorry. I think we are trying to encompass the Thrive Act and things that we are looking at. I'd still like to see the Thrive Act passed, and I don't ever give up, to be perfectly frank. But the Thrive Act addresses a lot of, Flint is an example of how it's a community that was impacted disparately by lead pipes. People didn't listen. They tried to get people's attention. And in the Thrive Act, we're trying to empower local communities to have their voices heard and to be able to address people that have come from communities that have are less well off, quite frankly, need to have more assistance and empower their voices. So I think that I don't know what's going to happen. The fact of the matter is, everybody's trying to figure out I could make David laugh maybe a little, maybe we get to smile. We're really starting to move into, okay, how's this really going to happen? Also, this summer, like when we come back, the Congress has been home for 3 weeks doing field hearings, etc. But when we come back next Monday, this is where we are really going to start to figure out, how does this come together? What are we going to move? The Senate's going to move probably different pieces than we do in the House. But in the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is going to have a lot of this, natural resources, and Transportation Committee, a lot of this work is going to be done there. Pieces of Thrive will be incorporated right into what we work on in committee and pass out of committee and try to put into one bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This next question is perhaps for David, and that is, to what extent does the administration consider supporting carbon pricing?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I'd love to hear the Congresswoman's perspective on this as well. We're hearing a lot, especially from business leaders and business trade groups, about their support for carbon pricing. And we appreciate it and expect that they are being sincere when they put it forward as a solution. The biggest challenge with carbon pricing, which in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense, is that it doesn't enjoy a great deal of bipartisan support in the Congress to the degree that it does, in the sort of business trade lobby. So I don't think that you've ever heard any opposition to carbon pricing as a theory from the president or from our administration. We are theoretically open to it, but it's not a central component of the American Jobs Plan at present, because there doesn't seem to be the political will to enact it. Congresswoman, I'm way out of my lane and I have an actual expert here. Would you care to dive in on that one?
Well, I'm not an actual expert, and I think that obviously where the administration is really critical to this. And I know that there are probably people here there's a very strong group in Ann Arbor that strongly supports this. I also, though, and I would be interested in what Ryan said, because one of the things I'm also very concerned about is that it not place an undue burden on people who can least afford it as well. And that's something that we're all very concerned about. I think politically it is hard to sell in the Congress. There's a bipartisan proposal. I don't want to hear it. I know there's a group out there strongly supporting it. I think we're all open. Everything's on the table right now, but I do think it has some things we're very concerned about. And one of those things is that we want to make sure, as we address these issues and move forward to the future, that we don't see certain people paying more of an economic cost, or that it places an undue burden on them. And how carbon pricing happens has a danger of doing that.
I'll just ask Ray, do you want to add in anything here?
Right.
Sure. As I'm thinking about carbon pricing and carbon tax and all of that, it really just takes me back to my initial comment around false solutions and what is able to happen even if these taxes are put on carbon prices, is that folks who continue to who have the funding, who have the money, as Congresswoman Dingle said, to continue to like buy carbon, to continue to like deal with the tax? Does that actually deal with the issue at its root? And so part of what I am thinking through, at least with this question, is what does it look like to be, you know, carbon free? What does it look like for all of these things? And I know, you know, this is for a lot of folks, this seems like a very lofty conversation. But we are at a place in our climate crisis that we need to be having these lofty conversations, because we need to be building the infrastructure for our future now. And so that's just what I had to offer on that.
Thank you. We have a question from Jim, and this is sort of the connection between sort of local, state, and federal, if you will. Jim is asking the following question. Drinking water, sewage disposal, stormwater systems currently use significant fossil fuels while protecting public health and the environment. We can play a significant role in addressing climate change by using less energy and producing our own clean energy alternatives, but we need federal assistance in getting these systems off the ground. Can we expect, and the we is probably, you know, at the local level, to see investments in water systems to modernize our aging infrastructure, bring energy efficiencies, health and safety improvements, and better environmental protection while investing in producing energy in these systems? So complex question perhaps, but I think a good one. And I don't know, I'm assuming perhaps the Congresswoman or David wants to start, but Ray, you may have thoughts on this too, so.
I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, that's the whole purpose of what we are trying to do. You know, I can remember I was working police way back when I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but we were looking at renewables at the state level. But I don't even remember. I was in Congress when I somehow got pulled into this and was trying to bring everybody together, and everybody was having heart attacks about wind and solar and what it was going to do. Fact of the matter is, if you talk to utility companies, wind and solar have turned out to be very successful in the state of Michigan, not be as expensive as everybody thought. And they are the way of the future. So we want to set up a system that does eliminate fossil fuels, does do alternative forms of financing. We want to do, where do we need to do public-private partnerships? That's what the accelerator is about. It's the whole infrastructure bill that we're talking about, and addressing these water issues is absolutely critical. But that's a piece of how we address it. Also, making sure we are using renewables, alternative sources, etc. David, you might be able to improve on that.
I doubt I could, but just to add my 2 cents onto it, I think it gets back to our broader discussion about the American Jobs Plan and about what constitutes infrastructure in this day and age. As we all watch to some degree of horror, the way that the Colonial Pipeline shut down, disrupted transit and travel and the way of life here on the East Coast and in the Southeast especially, it was a reminder to me that even though I wouldn't ask anyone on this video conference to do any cheerleading around an oil pipeline, it's a powerful example of the idea that anyone who thinks that infrastructure in this day and age is limited to just being a road or a bridge isn't living in the real world. And the infrastructure very much involves how we get our energy, how we get our drinking water, how we remove our sewage. And all of these things are part of the clean energy future, and all of them are addressed in the American Jobs Plan. And people like Congresswoman Dingle are arguing strenuously every single day that infrastructure in this day and age is more than just a road or a bridge.
Thank you. Perhaps we'll end with one last question, and we're coming to the top of the hour here. And this is sort of a question statement. Mike says, electric vehicles are very powerful and can generate twice the horsepower of gasoline powered vehicles. This should be regularly talked about. I guess the question is, you know, where is that conversation happening? Do the American people know this, you know, and how do we make sure that they do know this?
It was sure happening in Dearborn a couple of weeks ago when the president floored it in that F-150 Lightning. I don't know what more we as an administration could do to spread that message than the president already has. But we wholeheartedly agree.
That's why that event was so important, because now I'll give you my quick 101 EVs. For EVs we have to stay at the forefront. We are not going to give that technology to any other country. I just want to make that really clear. I'm keeping those jobs here. But there's three, I put them in three buckets. One, they've got to be affordable. And I won't get in trouble and say what I want to say, but the vehicle that's on the road right now is, in many people's eyes, a luxury vehicle that most people can't afford, and we're working on that issue. Two, the battery. We've got to. People need to have they need to have confidence that if they buy an electric vehicle, it's going to have the range that it needs, and we got to build it here, as I keep saying to you. And three, we got to build out that infrastructure. So they need to know that they're going to be able to, if they're out on the road on a trip, they're going to be able to fill up. And by the way, people are going to have to mentally think differently. We need to get high-speed chargers. We're working on all of that. But you're used to running into a gas station, filling up in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and going out. It's going to take a little longer for a while. And we also have to upgrade the power grid. And what does that mean? And who's going to, and that's got to be very intentional. We do need to do that. And by the way, we also have to make sure so that not everybody lives in a home with a garage or not. So we're going to have to think out of the box. How's everybody going to be able to charge? How are they going to make sure that if they install a charger in the garage, it's wired to be able to handle that? The first fire we have, someone's going to have a fit. I'll talk about every single aspect. IBEW is teaching me about installing outlets so I can learn every single piece of understanding it. So when I'm in that room and we're having the discussions, there's someone that's paying attention to it. And other people are doing the same thing, but I just mean this is an intentional, very focused, must happen, is happening conversation.
Okay, with that, our time has come to an end. I want to first say thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, David. Amazing conversation. Thank you for taking time with us this evening. I also want to thank everybody who tuned in this evening via Zoom and Facebook Live. I know you have lots of different things you could be doing with your time. So thank you for joining us and thank you for your thoughtful questions. We are truly at a very pivotal moment in this country, and the American Jobs Plan presents us with a very real opportunity to build back better and come out of this COVID-19 experience much stronger, much stronger. So I know we at Michigan LCV, we're currently calling on all of our members of Congress to support and pass the American Jobs Plan fully intact so we can realize this transformational moment. We are sending a one-click action in the chat so that anyone who's joining us can send a message to your member of Congress and urging them to support the American Jobs Plan. And we encourage you to take action and sign up to stay engaged with us in the days and months ahead. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. A full recording of the program will be available on our Facebook Live page very soon. Please be safe, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.